There we go. What's going on? Welcome in, everybody. Chase Young is on PUP. We got some news to come to talk about with these Washington Commanders. We got some winners and losers to discuss from the Washington Commanders preseason. I need some water, I guess. So let me take that break right now. But the Trap or Dive podcast is starting up right now. Let's get into it. Trap it down. Trap it down. You gon' trap it down. You gon' trap it down. I just appreciate everybody watching.
Watch him throw the ball. We gon' pick it off. You gon' let him hit the hole or you gon' cut it off. You gon' play through fourth and long or you gon' punt it off. Your defenders, heavy hitters, put your pads in. Don't be looking for the ref to throw no flags in. Keep the helmet on, keep the cleats tight. You the type to want to win by any means, right? You should look alive. This is Trap or Dive.
Let's go ahead and get the whole gang up in this thing right quick. Yes, sir. Here we go. Welcome back to another episode of the Trap or Dive podcast provided to you by 214 Media. I am your host, Maul and Maul, Hen Dog Maul, Coach Maul, all that good stuff. Tequila Maul tonight. I'm here with AJ, Dre, and before we get to our guest, man, AJ, Dre, how y'all fellas feeling tonight?
Shit, man, always good, glad to be here talking with the fellas,
I know AJ, he on the train, he on the plane and shit right now, so I know he's taking things a little quiet.
Yeah, I'm just on this flight back home, that's all.
All right, man, don't get too loud, you know what I'm saying? We're gonna talk a couple topics, man. Don't get too animated. Then like, bro, you gotta calm down. They don't want to turn the flight around because you get a little animated and shit.
Nah, they gonna be like, that's a Commanders fan.
Don't say that out loud.
Right, that's a problem. Hey, Rich Hawk, I see y'all in there, man. Welcome in to the show. Okay, so joining us right now, we got the good man Deuce. Deuce, I've come to know through a lot through. Actually, I ain't gonna lie to you. I think it's recent. I think this year, really, the Twitter Spaces and the thing that he got going on Twitter, man. Deuce is the host of the Red Zone in the Lab podcast, and he does a lot of Twitter Spaces that holds a lot of conversations. We had one today, I think. He had one today, I think, with Mark Tyler. Mark Tyler and Friends, I think, is the name of that Twitter Spaces that I hold. I think you hold it every Tuesday. So, yeah, man, welcome in, Deuce. Red Zone and Last podcast. How you feeling, like, big dog?
Man, what's good, Mom? I appreciate you for having me on. What's up, Dre? What's up, AJ? Again, man, I appreciate y'all for stopping by. And bro, the intro is fire, man.
Hey, man, it get the juices flowing, bro. Every time, bro, I crank that joint up in my headset, and I get, that's my mood, bro. Especially on the morning shows too. Boy, I need that to wake up.
yeah, morning shows what, 7, right?
Yeah, 7 a.m., man. 7 a.m. Ralph, I see you on Twitch, man. What's going on, big dog? What's going on, everybody, man, that's just checking in? Let's get the administrative item out of the way. And whichever way you are listening, whichever way you are watching, always be sure to rate, review, like the show. If you are new to the Trap or Dive podcast, Trap or Dive channels, make sure you hit that follow button or that subscribe button on Twitch or YouTube. You know the vibes, man. It helps the show's growth. We are almost there at that 1,000 subscriber mark on YouTube, man. That is a lot of subscribers, man. That's a lot of people that like what we're doing, that believe in what we're doing over here on the Trap or Dive side. So we truly appreciate it. On the show agenda today, it's not much. It's not much at all. Winners and losers from the Commanders preseason to this point. And we can take that whichever way that we want to go, fellas. And then secondly, all things considered, injuries, depth, overall skill at the position. What is our most concerning unit? And what is our least concerning unit? We're heading into that third preseason game where most likely you're not going to see a lot of starters in that third preseason game. So, we're really looking forward to like the depth guys playing, but also we're really just getting situated and ready for the regular season. So we kind of have an idea of who's our strongest and who's our weakest units heading into that third week. So, fellas, I think before we even get into that, Oh yeah. Okay, I think we can start off with a comment. Biggest loser is Jack Del Rio. I wanted to touch on some things that you talked about in the spaces, but I think Jack Del Rio is a good starting point. And then we can dive straight into the winners and losers of the preseason. So Rich Motley on YouTube mentioned Jack Del Rio as his biggest loser. Where are we at with him? And I know for the sake of AJ and Dre, we've answered this question and we've spoke on Jack plenty of times. I want to make sure that we get Deuce in here with his opinion and you get your first stab at it. Where are you at with Jack Del Rio heading into the season? You don't necessarily have to answer winner or loser if that's not your guy. But what's your thoughts on Jack Del Rio as we head into year 3 under him as the defensive coordinator?
Okay, so when it comes to Jack Del Rio, I think he severely underperformed last year. I think when they did make the switch and they got a little bit better on defense, when he finally made the switch with Landon Collins and he made the concept a little more simpler, those guys was able to attack the ball. But I just think he underperformed from the players that he have, the projection that he have. We often talk about the first round picks along the D-line. Those guys should be dominant. He should find a way to get those guys, be able to get one-on-ones. He should put those guys in position to be able to dominate. He has not done that. A lot of times you try to leave it up to the player, they might not be built like that. So it's going to take a scheme or some type of fit to get those guys going. And one person kind of comes to mind is Michael Parsons. We know when Michael Parsons first started out last year, especially in that Green Bay game, he got toasted, right? But so they had to make some adjustment to see how he can fit this decent, how we can use his skill set in order to be dominant. I just don't think Del Rio is up to the times to be able to do that. I think he's stuck in his ways. And honestly, if we don't come out strong this year, I don't think he makes it to the bye week. I'm hoping he don't make it to the bye week, whether we come out strong or not. But that's my take on Del Rio.
So bye week is what, week 14. And you're saying strong or not, this is a guy that you're already, tired of in a sense, or you've seen enough of is what I should say is the better way. You've seen enough of, and you're convinced of one way or another that this probably is a guy that you should move on from. At what point did you realize that, this ain't it? He ain't it. Was that last year? Was that 2020? When was that realization for you that says that bye week is probably the time to move on from Jack?
It was about week 4 of last year, right? We had these guys coming into the year. I mean, we had national attention about the D-line, right? We even had them saying they're going to break the sack record. They're going to do this. They're going to do that. But all of a sudden, they come out there. They're not playing as a unit, right? Everyone is playing one-on-one. Like, everyone is out there trying to get it for themselves. These guys fighting for double teams. The man beside them is not coming to help them. When they doing stunts, they're not pulling the man down. They're not making sacrifices for each other. Whose fault is that? It's the coach. It's up to him to step in there and say, hey, look, this is how this should be run. This is how we should run as a unit, not as, one-on-ones in a sense. The same thing that Sapp had to say when he came in during camp. He told them guys, this is a team. We got to eat together. You know what I mean? So that's the type of attitude that should have always been there. And for them to come out as slow as they did, and we saw the struggles that they had, obviously I believe that it was Jack Del Rio that wasn't making those necessary changes.
Fellas, where does this position coach conversation come into play? Because I'm not sitting here saying I disagree with you at all, Deuce, but I am saying these guys pointed the finger at somebody already. And they pointed the finger at this guy 2 weeks ago. And they said, you know what, bruh? Sam Mills, it's time for you to go. I love you. This is Ron speaking to Sam. I love you. I love what you've done for me. I love the fact that we've been coaching together for X amount of years, 10 plus years. But I got to do this for the team's sake. And if that most important piece of that defense, which is that front four, because they have so much invested on that unit, isn't coming together and helping this defense out, how much is it to do with coaching versus it's actually the people that they have on that defensive line?
I mean, I think it has everything to do with coaching. I think that they probably just flexed their muscle to get one of the people that they felt they could, have Ron make a change with. Even though he has a relationship with Sam Mills for years or whatever, father, and working with the Panthers, that was somebody that, he felt like he could cut ties with comfortably. he couldn't do the same with Jack Del Rio, even off the field shit. Like, just adding the fact that they're bottom tier defense rank wise, that alone should have been a fireable offense at the end of last season. Instead, they kept him around. Then you have a defensive coordinator making national news. He's on CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, all of that for disparaging comments, and that still wasn't enough to get him up out of there. It's not like this dude is great at his job. So they knew that they couldn't, flex their muscle to get him out of there. And that's why I don't even believe that he will be relieved of his duties by week. I feel like if you make it to week 14, you might as well finish the damn season at that point. It's gonna have to be extremely god awful defense in the first 2 weeks for him to get fired. Because Ron is gonna be loyal to his guy, like that's his boy he grew up with. I don't think he's gonna embarrass him in that nature and fire him in the middle of the season unless he absolutely has to, because it's just like god awful. I think with this defense, I don't know if any of you guys expected anything different when you bring back the same crew from last year. Where do you expect to get anything different? Whether it be schematically, personnel wise, you made no improvements. You actually got worse. You lost your D tackle depth. Chase Young is hurt. You're using a lot of rotational guys, no veteran presence at DN. You didn't improve the linebacker room at all. You flex Jamin Davis to a different position besides middle linebacker, but now you have Cole Holcomb holding down middle linebacker position. He can't cover for shit, and and you also lost some depth in your cornerback room as well. And Landon Collins not being in the picture at the Buffalo nickel, so you lost a veteran in that sense. On top of everything, so it's like, how did anyone expect this team to be different defensively? With Jack Del Rio, man, is I don't think it's really the players. I just think he's washed. He's not a good defensive coordinator. I think we reflect on people's past way too much. He was good with his tenureship with the Broncos, but a lot of people tend to forget when he was co-calling the defense in Oakland. And at the time when he was the head coach of Oakland, I was representing a middle linebacker for the Oakland Raiders in Navarro Bowman, who had ended up asking for a trade and got released and signed with the Oakland Raiders. So I know hands-on how he didn't really take to that defense well, and how he felt like a lot of the play calling was all over the place. Also had other friends that played under Jack Del Rio at the Raiders as he was the head coach and helping to call the plays alongside Ken Norton and the other defensive coordinators. So I just feel like at the end of the day, man, a lot of the blame more so has to be on Ron, because this is his guy that he brought in to call the defense. He didn't make any changes. Last year, Chris Harris was interviewed by the Indianapolis Colts for the defensive coordinator job. Also, Wisconsin for their D coordinator job. At some point, you have to have some foresight and understand who's really getting the best connection with these guys on the defensive side of the ball, and really can build that rapport. And maybe we need a philosophy change, because a lot of things that they're doing is like how offenses used to be called in the 2013s and 14s. Like, that 3rd and 4, you can't have your cornerbacks 7 yards off the ball. Like, quarterbacks is getting out the ball quick as hell. Like, you can't do that these days. And I just think that is making everybody look bad. And some people tend to be the fall guy. In this sense, it's been Sam Mills. I believe that if they lose, we will probably start hearing a little bit more insight into that situation and that breakdown, because none of us really know what happened there. We're just assuming. But at the end of the day, it's like Ron is the one who's keeping everyone in charge and has appointed Jack to run this defense. And unfortunately, there's no results. And every time you play a good quarterback, you just look like shit. So
all right, hold on. All right, let's go ahead and make sure, because we got a real. I get you, but you know what I'm saying. I think there's a lot to be said for everything. Like, we get Ron is in a position that's one thing. We get one angle, and then we understand that Jack Del Rio is another angle as well. Dre, how do you kind of mesh the two situations together? How do you kind of understand Ron's level of culpability, and how do you kind of understand Jack Del Rio's level of culpability? But also, I also think, and the reason why I brought up the players part is because at the end of the day, sure, like it's like the main thing and why I believe that coaching matters is because of that Kansas City Chiefs team in 2012. They had 9 Pro Bowlers on that team. Either 2012 or 2013, whatever the year before Alex Smith got there and Andy Reid. They had 9 Pro Bowlers on that defense come in, or that was on that team. And as soon as Andy Reid got there, they went 13-3 the next year or something like that in the playoff team, and that was a top 10 defensive unit. So yes, coaching matters, but sometimes like it's not always that great with a team. Like it's never that great of a turnaround. So that's why I implemented the player side too, because it may be the case that we may be overrating our own talent, and I'm not saying that matter of factly, and that's my opinion, but I want to put that out there because sometimes we don't take into account that it's the player side. So, Dre, I want to get your opinion on how do you kind of merge the coaching and then the player side? How do you kind of interpret this?
Jamal, that's actually a good point you brought up because it's funny. We all, me, you, and AJ actually was talking in the group text earlier, and we was naming our most overrated players, and most of those guys came from the defensive side of the football. I mean, so if you want to talk about the culpability on the players, I mean, you do have to kind of look at some of the talent, on the team. I mean, I do think there is talent. I mean, you have first round picks all over the D line, but at the same time, you can look at a lot of our guys and say none of these guys have lived up to what they're supposed to be. Now, you can look at coaching and you can throw that in there, and I'll be the first to tell you, Jack Del Rio's seat should be the warmest. I mean, because the unit that he had last year, he comes with a great reputation of coaching defense. I mean, he's had top 5 defenses almost every stop he's been at. So you kind of had this expectation for him when he got here. And then the first year, and this is kind of why, like, I'm not with AJ in a sense. Like, I'm with AJ, but I'm not with AJ. When AJ is basically like, oh yeah, Ron should have fired him. Now, I get it if Ron wanted to fire Jack Del Rio for the distractions off of the field, because that stuff was unnecessary. But from a pure football standpoint, Ron's probably looking at it like this. The first year we had a top 5 defense, even though you got to look at it with context and say, hey, they weren't playing top quarterbacks. They had a weak schedule. You can say all of that. But at the end of the day, they still had a top 5 defense. The next year, they were horrible. So in Ron's mind, it's like, why am I firing a guy for 1 year of bad defense when that's kind of an anomaly in Jack Del Rio's career? So, but that doesn't mean that his seat shouldn't be hot. And that's because of that bad year. Like, I don't agree with he should be fired strictly off of that one bad season, but I do think that there should be pressure on him because now you're going into year 3 with him and you're coming off a really bad year. And my issue with, Jack Del Rio and Ron, kind of early in this preseason already is we're hearing some of the same things from last year. When you start hearing Ron talking to press conferences about players not playing discipline and not standing in their lanes and not standing in their rush gaps, whatever the case may be. Now, that's when I'm questioning coaching because I'm saying you told these guys that last year. And now I'm questioning your ability to get across to these players to make them see what you are trying to do. Because if you keep talking about they're not disciplined or they're not standing in their gaps and they're not doing this, that, or the third, at some point, you're not reaching them. You're not doing something on the coaching standpoint to get these guys to see your point. I mean, this is not year 1. At this point, you can call these your guys. This is Ron and Jack's guys. So if these guys aren't listening, whose fault is that now? And we're in year 3. So I'm just kind of, that's what makes me kind of skeptical going into this season with the defense because it's like, all right, you're still hearing that. It's not a simple thing where, they just beat us or they just got this. No, we're still hearing the same issues, and that makes me a little skeptical. So that's when you got to kind of start saying, all right, well, coaching is a big issue here if that's the case. Like, when are these guys going to reach them? When, we talked about firing Sam Mills III, and Sam Mills III, we heard that he had a disconnect with players. Okay, cool. You fired him. Now things should get better. So now we want to start seeing these results. We want to start seeing the progression. We want to see that these guys are playing discipline, and that's where coaching comes into play.
Deuce, before we get into or transition to the next topic, first off, Marcus, I see you in the chat. Throwbacks Claude. That almost threw me off for a second. Rob, I see you. Slim, I see you. Rich said, I'd like to see Coach Harris give a shot to a younger guy. We've lost so many young coaches. Marcus said, I think the disconnect between the coaches and players, I think that is the disconnect, excuse me. He wanted Brian Flores when he got fired last year. And then Tat said, throwbacks. Dre just said exactly what I was going to say. We make some mistakes. Why aren't those problems fixed? Deuce, before we close out on this one, do you have any last thoughts before we transition to the winners and losers? And everybody, winners and losers of the preseason, who do you have? Who are your winners? Who are your losers? Do you have any final thoughts on this topic, Deuce?
Yeah, just about the Sam Mills firing, right? You knew who he was in January. You knew who he was in February. Why all of a sudden we come to July or early August, and now you want to make a move to fire him? Like Ron said that they had a difference of opinion. I mean, I can go into all sorts of theories that I've heard about why that relationship went as sour as it did as far as on the football side of the ball. But when it comes to, like, you know, putting the blame on them for the defensive line, I mean, he knew who he was in the spring. So why didn't he make a move then and try to get another defensive line coach in here? So I don't think that move was solely based on the poor performance of the D-line. I think it has some more. And like AJ said, you know, at some point, if it gets worse, we might figure out exactly what it was.
All right, here we go. But first and foremost, and I see you, Ralph, on the winners and losers. Let's get through the injuries and transactions right quick. Logan Thomas, man, the big dog, the big tight end, man. Tight end number 1, activated off PUP list. So we can hopefully expect to see him back by week 1 if all goes well in his recovery. But he did say that he is ahead of schedule, so things are looking good on that side. The Commanders, I think yesterday, claimed tight end Kendall Blanton off of waivers from the Los Angeles Rams, and then also signed tight end Jake Halsman, whoever the hell that is. I don't know who he is, but Halsman. And then Bunami Rutimi and tight end Eli Wolf placed on injury reserve, and then the last man, the big dog, defensive end edge rusher Chase Young, placed on PUP. Something that we were kind of we didn't expect PUP, but we did know he was going to miss some time in the regular season. But officially placed on PUP, will miss at least 4 games to start the year. Quickly, fellas, are we? Because you asked this question on Twitter, Jay. I think it's fair to ask it on here. Quick and what's some reasonable expectations for Chase Young when he comes back? And should he like be back by week 5, or is this something where they can take their time even longer than the initial PUP expectations?
Yeah, I mean, I did ask that question because I legitimately wanted to know, because it's an unfortunate situation with Chase. Like, I mean, obviously you don't want to rush him back. You want to keep him, you know, on ice until he's 100% ready to go. But at the same time, we don't know when that can be. I mean, that can be middle of the season at some point this year. And then you're going to have to give him a reasonable amount of time to get acclimated back to playing games at a live speed again, which is, you know, fine. That's the recovery. But when you're looking at the overall grand scheme of things, it's just an unfortunate situation, because you look at Chase Young's second season last year before his injury, he was underwhelming. He wasn't the guy you thought you drafted. Well, he didn't look like the guy that you drafted or envisioned him to be. And then year 3, looks like it's pretty much going to be a throwaway year. I mean, whatever he does play this year, you just kind of hope that he just flashes. And I mean, that's the realistic expectation for Chase. Like, you realistically have to give him that chance to say, hey, you know, we're working with you. We want to see you flash. We're not expecting this dominant guy to come in mid-season, even though he's very talented. But I just don't know how much expectations you could put on him coming off of this really serious injury. And it's just unfortunate, because it looks like it's going to be 2 years of kind of wasted production with Chase Young. So you're going to have like kind of the same questions going into year 4, more than likely, about Chase. Like, what is he? Is he going to break out this year? Is he finally going to be that guy we drafted? But realistically, you know, everything aside, you know, no matter how unfortunate it is, we can't expect, you know, I guess, greatness when he does come in, just because of when he's coming in. And I know a lot of people like to compare Nick Bosa's situation, but Nick Bosa started from game 1 last year, and his injury wasn't as serious. I don't think it was. He started from day 1 last year, whereas Chase, in a sense, we don't know when Chase is coming. So we got to kind of temper expectations, which is unfortunate, but I think it's fair.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Chase, I don't really have much expectations, because once again, it goes back to the scheme of it all. We seen when he did play last year, him and Sweat weren't really getting to the quarterback anyways. I just feel like, you know, if he makes it on the field this year, you know, that'd be a bonus to the team. If he doesn't, you know, it is what it is. I just feel like Chase is in a tough situation where if whenever he does show back up on that field, a lot of the fans are going to expect him to put up big numbers no matter what and be productive. But he's coming off a very serious ACL injury, and then on top of that, you know, the defense. We're already talking about the defense being projected to be bottom tier, and we ain't even seen a week 1 game. So just imagine getting thrown in the mix of that. So I think it's just something you just gotta wait out and see.
But
Because
AJ, I want to ask you before you finish. He won Defensive Rookie of the Year in the same scheme. So how much did the scheme affect him in the second year, in your opinion? I mean, to say that, you know, it's more scheme why he didn't dominate in the second year.
well, I feel like with year 1 for Chase and especially for Jack Del Rio with that defense, we also have to provide context with that. They went against a lot of second tier quarterbacks that they were able to put up, you know, stats against, whether it be turnovers, sacks, things of that nature, that allowed, you know, Chase to even win that award as Defensive Rookie of the Year. So whenever they did face, you know, top tier quarterbacks, it didn't look as pretty. And as you've seen even last year when they faced those number 1 quarterbacks, they ranked pretty poorly last year. What I want to say was the 25th overall defense. I don't know.
Bottom third, leave it at that. I
Yeah.
say it wasn't good.
So I guess that's where I bring up the difference in year 1 versus year 2. It's the type of quality of quarterback that they played and how long they held onto the ball and the inefficiencies that the opposing end had. But I mean, like I said, I just feel like Chase is in a tough situation because for the rest of his career, especially while he's in Washington, he'll always be compared to Justin Herbert in that case. And then also the fellow Ohio State BS, the Bosa brothers, as far as what they've been able to produce on the NFL level, and especially Nick coming off of his ACL injury, that one season he had about 16 sacks.
Deuce, you got any expectations on Chase Young in terms of his second year? Or is this something where like you're loosely hoping that he's just a guy who can return the form?
I want him to show progression from his rookie year, right? I want him to show me something different that he can do. I want him to stop with the stutter moves. I want him to go back to the power moves, the speed move, and hopefully he was able to find some type of bend somewhere. I know he had a lot of hand work with Von Miller in the offseason. So hopefully some of that can kind of, you know, he could kind of bring and add to his toolbox. But I think I think for Chase Young last year, he was a little too cocky, I think. You know, coming out with the high expectation, they're going to do this, they're going to do that. And he didn't adjust to me. He didn't get better the second year. So hopefully he took this off season a little more serious. You know, he like I said just now, he's with Von Miller. In the off season, he couldn't do much, but it was more so mental reps. So hopefully that helped him. But as far as expectations, you know, I'm still high on Chase Young. I still think he can be dominant. I still think he could be one of the best pass rushers in this league. But again, he has to take this serious and be willing to add more to his toolbox to be, you know, effective if you want to be in a conversation with the Bosa brothers.
All right. So let's go ahead and catch up with the comments because we are transitioning to our winners and losers of for the Commanders preseason to this point. I saw King Ralph. He brought up the good man Armani Rogers already. He said the winner for him is a tight end Armani Rogers. Loser, Antonio Gibson. He said Antonio Gibson is a loser. He said another loser is the fans. I don't even know
that was funny. I saw that.
Yeah, I don't even know what he meant by that, but that's funny. He said another winner was Daniel Wise. Throwbacks mentioned the O-line injuries concern me for the most part, but Ralph also circled back, said depth. I agree with this one. Offensive line depth is something I was concerned about the offensive line altogether, given that it was a whole new unit from the interior standpoint, but they held up pretty well from first unit, second unit, and third unit. So offensive line is winner, the depth side, and then obviously Brian Robinson. Let's see who else we got. Okay, Hawk checked in. What's going on, Big Dog? What's going on, Cody? And then we have one more thing. What's going on, Janet? One more thing, Tats mentioned last year quarterbacks were throwing the ball so fast, Chase and Sweat couldn't get there. Jack also had Chase dropping back in the coverage on some plays. Everything changed when they made Collins play in the box. That's a mixed bag.
Yeah, I agree.
Because like when you play that 5-man front, you have a lot of games that you can play in that. You can play your fire zones. You can play a lot of mixed coverages and create pressure in that standpoint. And ultimately, when you have edge rushers in the 3-4 or 4-3 scheme, you have it more likely in the 34. But in either scheme, you're going to have edge rushers dropping the coverage. It just is what it is. That's the nature of that. You don't want them dropping back 90% of their snaps because that's not what they get paid to do, but they do drop back in coverage. So like when people come across those comments and say things like that, I understand the frustration when you see it on TV, but it's part of a scheme. It's literally part of any NFL scheme. You're going to see a defensive end or a linebacker at some time, an edge rusher. You're going to see them dropping into coverage.
Shit, you might see a D tackle dropping coverage.
Yeah, it just is what it is. D tackle dropping coverage too. Okay, winners and losers. Let's get right to it, fellas. Deuce, I'm gonna circle back right with you off the top. Who are your winners and who are your losers for the Commanders preseason to this point? Who you got?
Offensive line, right? Both games, the offensive line held up well. Even this last game, we had four starters out in the sense if you want to count West as a starting center, because we know Chase really came back on the snap count, so he really wasn't there. But they still held up. They still made holes. They still protected well. Even the first game and it's the starters against the starters, they held up. The second team, the third string, they all held up. So I was really impressed. So the offensive line is the winners, and the losers is Danny Johnson. Danny Johnson was chasing people both preseason games. He's looked terrible, and he was a guy that I was hoping that he can kind of help solidify that secondary, but I just don't know, man. It's like every time you see him, he was running behind the guy. So that's definitely my loser, Danny Johnson.
AJ, what you got?
Yeah, as far as winners for this preseason so far, Brian Robinson, coming in as a rookie and solidifying his opportunity to, start in this league immediately. I do expect him to be RB1 when it comes week 1 against the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think he's shown enough for the team that he's going to gain positive yards. He's going to go north and south. He's not about to go east and west. And, in a lot of cases with this type of offense, you need those positive yards, whether it be 2, 3, 4 yards. You need someone falling forward and also holding on to the ball. I think he's a big winner. I think Amani Rodgers also showed that, even though he's new to the position, that he can convert and be someone that can be a pass catcher within this offense as a tight end. I think he locked himself in a position to be on the 53-man roster, whereas maybe coming into training camp and preseason, he was on the bubble. I think he's a big-time winner in that regard. Another player I think is a winner is Derek Forrest. He's shown that he can play that Buffalo nickel as well. He can be productive there and also be an asset on special teams if need be. I guess we just focusing on the winners or just winners and losers.
You can go both.
Losers. I mean, I feel like the losers really that came out of this, I think, possibly is Ron Rivera and Jack Del Rio, because Ron is supposed to be a defensive guy, and Jack is calling the defense. You still have the same questions for the defense from last year. Nothing looks different. Everything looks the same, and it's called a lot of people to question what's going on that end of the ball. So that's who I say is the loser of preseason so far.
Dre, where you at with it?
I mean, yeah, winners, I'll be quick. Brian Robinson, of course. I mean, we've been talking about the last couple of weeks. He's looking like he's coming out of preseason and training camp as RB1. I'm going to add Dax Milne to my winners because Dax Milne, I think he's had a hell of a camp from everything we've heard. I think he solidified his spot at the back end of the wide receiver depth. And not only that, I think you'll also see him probably be the primary punt returner. You may see Dodson back there a couple of times, but I think Dax Milne probably has shown the most as far as that. Amani Rogers. I mean, somebody had to do something at tight end with all the injuries. I mean, everyone was hurt, and he was like the only available guy. And I thought he caught a nice amount of targets from Carson Wentz, and Carson Wentz seemed to like going his way. He didn't drop any passes. So I mean, at the very least, he's going to be a guy that's going to stick around in the practice squad, and maybe be stashed and be a part of this roster in the future. Defensively, Daniel Wise, I thought he was a winner. I mean, I thought he had a pretty solid preseason from everything I've watched. Shaka Toney, I think especially with Chase Young, the news with him going to be out for quite a while. I think he's a guy that they're going to have to use more often. As an edge rusher, speed rusher, because I mean, as Maul was saying, and this is something I noticed too, other people were, noting that the pressure just wasn't getting there if John Allen and Montez Sweat wasn't doing it. So I think Shaka Toney is a guy that can be an edge bender on the other side of Sweat on the opposite end, and probably can make a name for himself early on. And I think he already showed that in the Chiefs game this past week. He had like a 1.5 sacks. So I got to call him a winner because I think he's going to have a more solidified role, especially with the Chase news. Losers, man. First up, Alex Erickson. I got to put him on the losers list because he was a guy. He was a guy that was, they liked him in special teams. He was a veteran, and he just hasn't looked good at all at kick returns. The one spot where he probably had to look good to make this roster, and I have to say that he's shit the bed there. Don't expect him to make it. Antonio Gibson, I would put him on the losers, but I'm not going to put him on losers because. The funny thing about this whole situation with Antonio Gibson, he may have lost his spot as a lead back, but it's a blessing in disguise for him because now I think they're going to finally use him in the role that they should have used him in for the last couple of years, which is just get him in space, let him work, make him more explosive. So I don't see him as a loser because I actually think he's going to gain a win from this situation. Losers on the defensive side of the football. I mean, just the linebacker depth in general. No one has stepped up to say, this guy is going to be, a player for us, or no one has kind of validated why Ron Rivera and Jack Del Rio and the rest of the staff didn't feel like they needed to upgrade at this position. I mean, I think Jamin Davis has looked solid. Holcomb still looks like the same player. I mean, where's Khalil Hudson, Mo Eifler, these guys? No one has emerged to say, we have linebacker depth and we feel comfortable here. So those are my losers.
And to circle back, so Alex Erickson, excellent call out. Everybody, I think, to this point, that's not named Dax Milne or Antonio Gibson, if you were trying out for returner, punt return, kick return, you're done. Everybody was ass. Like, the only person that really stood out was Dax Milne. And the only reason why I'm keeping Antonio Gibson in terms of special teams on that winner side is because, he's naturally good at it. So he only had 1 rep in preseason, but they're going to give him opportunities in regular season, clearly. But, yeah, everybody that's not named Dax or Antonio, boot. My losers, man, and I'm going to start with actually what you said with Shaka Toney is that pass rush. That entire defensive line unit that's not named Allen and that's not named Sweat. I think when it comes to Toney, let's start with him. I want to give him his credit, and then I'm going to talk about why he's on the side of the losers and not necessarily a standout. His credit is that he has very good explosiveness off the line. I love what he does in terms of his get off. He's able to get up field quickly, and that is an added bonus. But he's not controlled when he bends the corner. I don't think that he's controlled his first. He had 3 opportunities against the Carolina Panthers to close in on the quarterback. 1 rep, he ran into his own defender, his own teammate, and got clotheslined by his own teammate because he couldn't bend the corner, and he couldn't get square with the quarterback. Another time, he ran right around him again, got washed around the edge. And ultimately, the only reason why I'm saying, the positive is that he is able to get around. He is able to get off the ball. He does have explosiveness. He is able to beat these tackles, but he has to be a better closer. And he's doing this against those third stringers. So it was good that it happened against the Chiefs, and he did it against Jahan Christian, who was ass. But he did it against Jahan Christian. But it shows that he's capable of doing it. But I think I need to see more in terms of being able to be consistent. Because, again, back to this, my overall losers, this pass rush, man, if it's just going to be Sweat and Payne, and they're not able to generate pressure through other pressure packages like that 5-man front or sending 5, blitzing 5, and however which way they want to do it. If they aren't able to generate pressure and Sweat isn't winning, and Allen isn't winning, then we're going to be in a problem situation all year long. And I'm not trying to run into those problems because it's going to be a long season if that's the case. So that's my main loser. Secondary, I don't have too much of a problem with. And I actually think, to be honest with you all, the secondary wasn't terrible against the Chiefs. Like the starting guys, I haven't even looked into the depth guys. I really don't think the coverage was terrible either. Like I think the pressure they dialed up was not getting home, and also the actual one-on-ones up front was people like John Allen getting doubled. Why is this John Allen getting doubled and 3 other defenders are man on man and you aren't able to beat your man? Like credit to Kansas City, but you have a defensive line full of first-round picks and then also guys in terms of Ron Rivera that they believe in. So they need help up front. Or they just need better and quicker development or scheme plays in terms of the regular season to help get these guys some wins. That's my main loser. Anything up on the offensive side, I don't really have any main losers. Like Antonio Gibson, you swayed me, Dre. It's a really good angle that you played. Sure, he lost the starting role, but ultimately I think that he gained a better role for him. So I'm not even going to call him a loser. I think the winners is obviously Brian Robinson, Armani Rogers that we talked about as well, and Daniel Wise on the defensive line. He's shown that he can get opportunities, and I'm not going to call him like when I use those 2 guys that's winning up front in terms of Sweat and Allen. I didn't say Wise yet because he hasn't been a full-time starter, and I want to see him with more looks with the starters in the regular season, but he's obviously made my 53. So those are my winners and losers. The short list. Carson Wentz doesn't make anything. Jahan Dodson doesn't really make anything. I just like that these guys came out healthy and that we're going to have them for the regular season. But ultimately, that's it for me. But back to like some of these playmakers. We mentioned Armani Rogers. We mentioned Brian Robinson. Out of these winners and losers, like how do we kind of project, based on what we know to this point, what they can do with a Brian Robinson moving forward in the scheme, and maybe how it ties into being able to actually move the ball with Carson Wentz. I'll leave the floor open to whoever wants to take the first stab at it. But what are we looking at with these starters in the offensive side of the ball?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Deuce. Yeah.
I think with Brian Robinson, it cuts down on the 3rd and longs. I think he puts them in a better situation to be able to move the change. I think that's a positive for Brian Robinson.
And actually, I gotta agree 100% with Deuce there. I mean, you've seen it in the preseason so far. I mean, this is a reason why they've moved the ball, and you've seen them move the ball in preseason. You know, even though they haven't scored, you want to see them finish off drives, but I think that comes with maybe more game plan, and maybe they're going to show more explosive plays. But I mean, I think they had maybe 1 3-and-out with the starters the whole preseason. I mean, they played 6 snaps, but either way, you were seeing them in good situations. They weren't in 3rd and longs a lot of the time. I mean, and that's because Brian Robinson is getting the early yards. You know, he was getting 5 to 6 to 7 yards, sometimes 9 yards on carries. And it just sets up the offense to just, you know, keep the chains moving. So, I mean, he's a guy that you can at least rely on in that aspect. And I kind of go back to 2020 when I think about the vision for this team with Brian Robinson. Like Peyton Barber was here in 2020. A lot of people hated Peyton Barber. They didn't like Peyton Barber. But Peyton Barber was the guy they liked because he moved the chains. And he was going. If you needed a yard, he was going to get you them too. And you know, he may not have gotten you more than that. And I don't think he was any kind of special player. I mean, I didn't care much for the guy, but he was at least good for that. But I think Brian Robinson is like a more elevated version of Peyton Barber. He's a guy that he can be a bruiser, you know, and he's a guy that he has vision. He's a natural running back. And we've kind of seen with the Antonio Gibson experiment that he's not an every down back. I mean, it's not natural to him. It's never been natural to him because he's come from playing receiver. And now you got Brian Robinson as a guy who is a running back's running back. I mean, Alabama, he sat behind like Najee Harris and all these good guys over there at the running back position. So he just looks so natural out there when he's running the ball, and you could just see it. So he's not leaving meat on the bone a lot of the time. Like, he's taking the right gaps, he's taking the right holes. You can see the vision. Like, he may not be a breakaway artist or a home run threat, but that's fine. You don't need that. You just need a guy that can consistently, get you the yards that you need to move, and positive yards. Like, he's a positive yard machine from what I've seen out of him, and that's going to help this offense tremendously. Not be in third and long situations. A lot of times you're going to be in 2nd and 3 or 3rd and 2, and those are more manageable situations for the offense, and I think that's going to help Carson Wentz out tremendously.
So we've kind of hinted on it based on our winners and losers of the preseason to this point, but all things considered, let's close out with this topic. K-Bob, Kevin, I appreciate you checking in. I see you. He talked about London Fletcher was pissed in the booth. Oh, he heard the game. I didn't even hear it. London Fletcher was pissed in the booth with the D-line not getting home on Saturday. Hey, a lot of people are understanding the the situation at that defensive line standpoint. But all things considered, injuries, depth, overall skill, etc., whatever, all things considered, put it all in the box. What is your most concerning position unit on the Commanders, and what is your least concerning? Who are you most confident in, and obviously who is your most worrisome? Dude, so I'm gonna kick it off with you. AJ, you got the floor next.
Least concerning, let's go ahead and state the obvious, is the offensive line. That's my least concern. Rather who's there or not, I believe.
Second least concern then too. So get your offensive line, and who's your second least concern too?
Yeah. My second least concern, of course, is I don't want to say of course, because maybe it's not with some people, but Jahan Dodson. I've watched him up close in person. I watched him at Penn State when they just smacked Maryland last year. Like, I watched this guy play. I believe he is the real deal. I believe that the hype is real. It can be a little overhyped because he hasn't played in an actual NFL game. You look at the preseason, I kind of look back and I think about McLaurin preseason. I think he had the same type of preseason his rookie year. So that's my least concerning when we're talking about least concerning Jahan Dodson. The position I'm most concerned about is linebacker, of course. I think Jamin Davis, he has gotten a little better, but how far is he away from being an actual every down consistent contributor? Like, how far are we gauging that? Something happens to Cole Holcomb, then like, what do we have? We have David Mayo. I don't even want him to make the team. The kid Milo Eifert, he got one big hit. Flex got him a good meme on the internet, but other than that, what else did he give us? So when it comes to the linebackers, that's what I'm most concerned about.
Yeah,
AJ,
I think for me, the least person I would say I'm concerned about is Terry McLaurin. I know he's going to show up and do his job and make the plays happen and hold those around him accountable. I guess you could also say Deron Payne and Jonathan Allen. I know what they bring to the table. I know what they're going to do in the NFL. I know what they're going to do within the scheme. So I'm not really concerned with them there. Those that I am concerned about, just to piggyback off of Deuce, is linebacker position. I don't think I'm as concerned about Jamin Davis as I was coming into it. I'm more so concerned about Cole Holcomb, have been, once they never addressed that middle linebacker position. And they told us the whole offseason that they were in need of a middle linebacker, a veteran linebacker. And we have seen no improvements in that end. You still have David Mayo on the roster. Even the guy, Nathan Jerry, that you picked up, you released him today, I believe. You have no depth, especially from a veteran that can actually give you good snaps there if anything were to happen to Jamin Davis or Cole Holcomb. So that's a big-time concern on my end. And, of course, the elephant in the room, Carson Wentz. You got a glimpse of exactly who he was a little bit, in his tenureship with the Eagles and the Colts on that. I want to say was it 3rd and 4 or 3rd and 7, where he didn't take the check down. He ended up getting his right tackle and tight end beat by George Kalafis for that sack. And instead of taking that check down, he tried to create too much in the pocket and ended up
I don't think he
taking
was
them
gonna
out
see
of
the
field
check
goal
down
range.
though, AJ. I ain't gonna lie to
I mean,
you.
but yeah, but
The way
either way,
that way that play
you
was
got
set up.
you got to get the ball out your hands because you
That
taking
part
that
I
sack
agree
took
with.
them out of field goal range. So if that's regular season reps, you lose the opportunity to get 3 points on the board. So I thought that was alarming, and that's kind of like been the basis of people's negative remarks in regards to Wentz. But yeah, those are my two concerns with this team: Wentz and Cole Holcomb in particular in the linebacker position and the lack of depth.
Jay.
Yeah, I'm actually glad I went last because I actually got a question for you all after I finish up this answering this. But for my least concern, I mean, obviously Terry and John Allen. I mean, those are just your two special players. They're just two best players on the team by far. You know what you're getting. They're both professionals. They're gonna, bring it. And I also believe, they're great for the people that work in their position group and on that side of the football. So those are the least concerned. Most concerned, I got to go with AJ on Cole Holcomb. I mean, Cole Holcomb is definitely my biggest concern because he's the biggest question mark and he's the quarterback of the defense. He's the guy, that is supposed to be the mic this year. And so far, it hasn't looked too encouraging. I mean, from what I've seen, especially in his Chiefs game, I mean, he still looks kind of lost in coverage and he just doesn't seem like the coverage mic guy that you need him to be, at least to take this defense from being bottom third to at least, better half of the league. But that's my biggest concern. Other than that, probably Ben St. Juice. I mean, I like Ben St. Juice, and I think he's a talented kid, but
Talking about a curveball. Okay, I'm here for it. Talk to me.
but the slot cornerback position is something we need solidified on this defense. I mean, not only just that, but the depth of the overall defensive backs. You need depth back there, and cornerback is one of those places where you kind of look at Kendall Fuller. He's solid. He's going to give you what he's going to give you. William Jackson is supposed to be a number one corner in this league, and I think he may show that this year. But then everything else after that is a question mark, starting with Ben St. Juice, who was injured for most of the season, but the coaching staff loves him. I mean, but the question marks you have: can he stay healthy? And also, being a bigger guy that he is, can he adjust and be the slot cornerback that they're looking for this year? So that's something right now it's concerning to me. I mean, I do believe in the kid, and I do hope he solidifies it, but right now it's a concern to me. Now that is my concerns and least concerns, but I wanted to ask you all, the panel, this, while we, talking about the players and whatnot. When do we start expecting more from Montez Sweat? We talk about Chase Young so much, and what Chase Young can be or what he's supposed to be. But Montez Sweat is kind of quietly riding under the radar. And I feel like he has the talent to be a double-digit sack guy in this league, but we haven't seen it yet. We can't truly say that Montez really had a breakout season in the NFL. Yeah, I thought the second season was pretty solid, was pretty good, but I still kind of expected more out of Montez because if you remember in that draft that he came in, it was the 2019 draft. We drafted him with Dwayne Haskins that year. Montez was talked about as like a top 10 to top 15 talent in that draft, but he only slipped out of, or at least to where we picked him at, where we traded up to get him because of heart conditions. And, that's why he slipped. But playing talent-wise, no one has ever questioned that. So when can we kind of expect, or should we expect Montez to be more than what he's been? And what I say by that is, should we expect him to be a game breaker or a game changer? I think he should be.
So for me, I'm glad you asked this question. Now, first off, my bad. Let me check in with a couple people. Marcus said he's less concerned about tight end, or least concerned with tight end and receiver, but more about defensive line and linebacker depth. Fair enough. Roger said Cole ain't in it. Mike, I don't know what the hell Ron was doing. They have too many damn tweeners. This Buffalo nickel bullshit needs to go. Go get him, Mike. Stop this madness. Is exactly
That's
what he said.
exactly how he wrote it too.
Hey, look, check it. That boy, I felt the pain in that text. But Montez Sweat, man, it's a really good question, Dre. People forget that first year he finished the season with 7 sacks, but he had his first 8 games where he had 1.5 sacks. He had his first 10 games where he had 2.5 sacks. And then he went throughout the season, multiple weeks at a time, like 3 to 4 weeks at a time, where he didn't have any sacks. He didn't have a half a sack. He didn't have 1 sack. He had tackles, but he wasn't getting home. And that last week was the one that boosted him from 5 sacks on the season to 7. He had 2 sacks in the final game of the season where they lost 47-16. But ultimately, to your point, man, expectations is this year. It's week 1. Like, it's literally week 1 in terms of what you want to see in improvement, what you want to see from a stability standpoint, imprinting yourself in this defense as a game changer. And that's where I'm at with Montez Sweat. And that's why I think that this season for him is important. But ultimately, man, I want to see, have you grown as a pass rusher? Montez Sweat has always been a guy who's been able to win with power. Once he's able to get under your shoulder pass, he has the power and strength to drive you backwards. He has the speed. We know he has that straight line speed, and he can pursue really quickly. Like, some of the plays, if you look on the all 22, that man was a demon chasing down Patrick Mahomes. It just so happens that he was already outside the pocket, so a lot of his pursuits didn't mean anything. But you saw him close the gap quickly is where I'm getting at. But ultimately, when it comes to rushing the passer, you have to see more in terms of how he's able to win and things like that. And ultimately, if he's not able to beat you with a bull rush in years past, you beat him. You won. And that's why you're not seeing so much production from him from an actual sack standpoint and being able to close on the quarterback. But yeah, his season, his clock is ticking, and it starts in week 1 for me. We need to see a lot more from a person like him who started off slow and who's quietly gone under the radar because he doesn't talk a lot. He's like what Deuce mentioned last year. They talked about breaking the sack record. Him and Chase Young. That was the one time where you really seen him, and it was on camera, I believe, too. You really seen him like speak out there, be outgoing and stuff like that. But outside of that, he doesn't talk too much. So you don't really expect much out of him. But this year, I need to see it week 1.
Yeah, I mean, I think coaching matters. You know, like Maul touches on it. I touched on it a couple times, and especially, you know, even when you see like interviews out there with Mike Tomlin on the pivot, if you haven't seen it, go check it out. Like, it'll give you a real glimpse into why coaching matters and playing guys to your strengths. I think within that defense, the reason why you can't really see Sweat and even Chase in these situations step up and produce these higher numbers is because the quarterbacks that they tend to face feel comfortable being able to step up in the pocket. Because Jack Del Rio relies on that front four so much, you have to beat your guys or you're just not going to get home. You know, like if they, let's take preseason, for example, if Payne and Allen can really create that push up the middle, if Mahomes tries to run outside, Sweat is already there to get him for a sack. You feel me? So it's just it's a tough situation for them scheme-wise. But, yeah, I mean, I feel like Sweat definitely is under the radar as far as expectations. People forget that he's a first-round pick. I think because of Dwayne Haskins, God rest his soul, a lot of people do forget that. And, you know, he's in a different position than Chase. He definitely needs to start producing high numbers in order to get cashed out because his option is coming up next year, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, but we'll close out with you, Deuce. What's your thoughts on this situation? We'll get up out of here.
Yeah, I feel like all of you really, Dre. Like, I'm thinking it came into question for me last year. Like, we understand the tragedy he had and the COVID, but all that happened later on in the season. Like, he came out the season flat too. I thought that was going to be his year. That was going to be his big year. Like, he has to really show us something this year because, you know, he's going into the 5th-year option, and if he wants to get paid, he has to actually show us. Like, he has to be breakout because he has all the tangibles, right? He has everything that you would want in a defensive end, and through spaces, there are some people out there that think he's more talented than Chase Young. So he has to prove it, man. Like, this is, I think last year was the year. But, you know, really this year, he has to come out firing all centers. And I'm talking about the Jacksonville game. He has to come out firing that game. Like this, like you saying, like he was getting there, but he wasn't closing. We need him to close if he wants to be that elite player and get paid like it.
My guy Roger is going through it, rightfully so. But he is going through it over there. He said we overvalue this D-line full of first rounders with one above average defensive tackle and the rest of them are Jags. And that's one supposed and one that's supposed to be great, but it's hurt. The secondary is dreadful. Someone tell me why Chris Harris doesn't get any heat. His unit still has a miscommunication. This Negro ain't that good at coaching the DBs. It's time for him to go to, along with MAGA Jack. I love the energy, man, because I feel I feel the pain and the passion when he's sending these things out. Hey, Roger, don't ever stop hopping in the
two gun
Roger.
Roger come blazing with two guns, man.
Hey, we need that. And Rich, man, look, that's actually a very good question about some merch, man. I gotta dig into it. I gotta do my own. I gotta figure some shit out with the merch thing. But it's not a bad thing to tap into. We'll cross that bridge when we get there, man. But definitely appreciate you asking, fellas. Dudes, let the people know where they can find you, where they can see you, where they can follow you, all that good stuff, man. The floor is yours. We appreciate you coming in for the Trap or Die podcast this episode, man. I appreciate you hopping on with us.
Yeah, man, you can find me. I'm mainly always in spaces, man. You can find me at Red Zone and Lab _podcast on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter is all under Red Zone and Lag. You just put that in, you can find me. Yeah, man. So just follow the podcast. And Maul, man, I appreciate you. We just started this In the Lab live show on Mondays and Fridays, 4:30 to 6. And because of you, man, put me on the StreamYard and hooking me up when I first started out. I appreciate you, bro. You put me on a path. Sir. Appreciate y'all for having me on. Appreciate you, Dre. It's my first time interacting with you. I appreciate, AJ coming through on my space today, man. I appreciate the support from you guys.
And Deuce, I just want to say, man, I love the setup you got back there, man. DC Sports, man, the wallpaper, everything you got it going on over there, man.
Hey, I got a story behind it too. Maybe I'll tell you one day with the wifey.
Man.
Hey, there it is. Well, look, that is the end of this episode of Trap or Die Podcast. Appreciate y'all for watching. Appreciate y'all for listening. The fellas will be back. We're going to talk about the post-game stuff, but we'll definitely be back next Tuesday to chop it up, especially after that final 53 is set. So with that being said, y'all enjoy y'all day, enjoy y'all night whenever y'all watching. Peace.